Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Coffee with Craig, where we talk about all things firearms, firearms policy, politics, culture, media, you name it. We're talking about it right here on Coffee with Craig. So please take a moment, like and share the program so that your friends can join in the conversation. Also, if you haven't already done so, please make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And in the case of Facebook and YouTube, make sure that you hit the notification button. That way you'll be notified as soon as we go live, and you can participate in the live chat as the program is taking place. Also want to encourage you to please visit fpcgear.com. That's fpcgear.com. It is the place to go to get your Pro 2A swag. I'm talking, T-shirts, tank tops, coffee mugs, hoodies. It's a little warm for hoodies right now, but hey, we also got tank tops for the ladies. We also have stuff for the home, stuff for the office. I mean, you name it, we've got it at fpcgear.com. Now, the best part about it is every dollar that you spend goes right back into the fight for a right to keep and bear arms. So you can support the Second Amendment and you can look good doing it. That's fpcgear.com. All right. I wanted to report and kind of talk a little bit about a story that's kind of in line with some of the stuff we've been talking about. It may be a little old, but I think it is still quite relevant because I think it shows the example of the hypocrisy of the anti-gun movement. And this has to do with, you and I know that there have been just a massive increase in firearms sales ever since March, ever since the first announcement of the pandemic shutdown. Since March, we've seen a significant increase in firearm sales. And then starting in June, we started to see a lot of the riots that have been taking place. I'm sorry, let me clarify. Peaceful protests that have been taking place all around the country. How people's businesses have been robbed and looted, how individual lives have been put at risk by violent, angry mobs. I mean, peaceful protesters. All of that having been said, people are feeling a lot less sure about their safety and their well-being in many places here in these United States. So it's led to a significant increase in firearm sales. And obviously, if there's increase in firearm sales, there's also going to be an increase in ammunition sales. Well, one of the things that has come out of this has been a report by The Trace. Now, you guys have heard of The Trace, right? Right. You guys have heard of them. They are a publication that is, well, let's just put it this way. They exist for one reason, and that is to provide media and provide government with an excuse to take away our fundamental right to keep and bear arms. They're not journalists, right? They are in fact are reporting. They're what they call civic journalists, with the goal of trying to motivate and move both society and politicians to take away our fundamental right to keep and bear arms. Well, they reported on a preliminary study. Now, mind you, this is a preliminary study that was done out of UC Davis Gun Violence, or let me put it this way, Gun Confiscation Research Center. That's what I'm going to call them from now on, the UC Davis Gun Confiscation Research Center. But it's actually funded by California tax dollars. And they did a study, and the interesting thing is that it hasn't even been peer-reviewed yet. But they're already releasing the findings because, well, hey, you know what? If they can come up with a reason and excuse to motivate the media to try and talk about why they need to take away our guns, well, then they're going to do it. So in this study, let me just kind of break this study down for you a little bit. So in this study, what they did was they looked at March and May of 2020, and they looked at the national background data check information, right? Data information. And what they found was that 2.1 million firearm purchases, right? Which is a 64% increase over the previous period, according, once again, to the study from UC Davis. They're what they call their violence prevention, UC Davis violence. It's supposed to be gun violence prevention program, but we know it to be the gun confiscation program out of University of Davis. So it's a 64% increase, and mind you, this is pre-George Floyd. All right, so these numbers that they're seeing already that they were reporting were before even George Floyd went down and we started seeing and dealing with these national protests. Now, the authors of the study are arguing that the spike in firearm purchases is directly related to the subsequent increase in gun violence during the pandemic. Now, mind you, they say a little bit more than that. They infer that the increase in gun purchases resulted in the increase in the increased firearm purchases resulted in the increase in violence, when it was actually likely the other way around, as the media continued to report on increases in violence, because we have seen in just about every major city, whether it's Chicago, whether it's New York, whether it's Sacramento or it's Oakland, just about every major city has seen a significant increase, not just in crime and not just in property crime, but also in violent crime across the board. But once again, their inference is that, well, hey, that increase in violence is happening because, well, guns. Now, they're basing their findings on monthly data from the National basically from NICS, on firearm purchases and reported firearm violence from January 2018 through May 2020. So they're, once again, all they're doing is looking at the raw numbers. So in other words, they're saying, well, look, in 2018 and 2019, it was lower. So, and now all of a sudden there's a spike. Now, what they ignore of that is they don't go all the way back to, say, 2012, because here's what you'll start to see. If you go back to 2012 and then 2013, in 2014 and 2015, guess what you're going to see? You're going to see an increase, because across the nation, in particular in places like California that started going smart on crime, I'll just leave it at that, smart on crime. You started seeing more criminals on the streets. You started seeing more crimes and more violent crime in, once again, major cities across the country. Now, even with those increases, because you saw increases in those 2 years, also in 18 and 19, but then they've seen a 64% increase, or greater than a 64% increase in 2020. Now, what else has been going on in 2020? You guessed it, the pandemic. You also had a result of many places deciding that they're going zero bail, or they've either gone zero bail and or they are just letting people out of the county jails and out of the prison because, well, hey, we don't want them to get COVID. So the increase in crime has nothing to do with those things. It all has to do with the fact that, well, hey, guns. So to sum it up, their response is that in other words, the more excess firearm purchases a state saw, the more gun violence quickly followed. Complete and utter ignorance. They completely and utterly ignore the fact that, well, it happened before the violence started, or at least there was the implication of violence. And that's why I think the discussion of the policies is so important, because when you started to see local governments talking about, well, hey, like in California, we're going to be releasing 25,000 people from jail. What they did in California was eventually they would set a policy to release 25,000 people who were in jail. You had one guy who was released, and this is oddly enough, he literally was released. He stole a car. He was released. He stole another car, same day, was released. Went back and stole that same car, was released. And then eventually he would wind up shooting somebody or killing somebody. Folks, this is the sort of stuff that we're seeing, and this is the sort of stuff that they are excusing, and they're blaming guns for it. Now, once again, we're in trying times. I mean, things have never been in my lifetime like they are right now. There's never been more uncertainty, right? But we're in a day and age where the fundamental, where this is the time, right? This is the place where those fundamental rights, this is the reason why we had to enumerate them. Because we knew that in the name of an emergency, Government has a tendency to say we need to restrict those rights. We need to restrict people's free speech rights, right? We need to be okay with places like Facebook and Google censoring your speech, right? We need to censor your speech. We need to make it so that you can't go to your state capitol and you can't rally. Although it's odd that protests, any other protest other than Black Lives Matter, is considered not considered a valid reason to gather with more than 25 people. But they want to restrict your free speech rights. They want to restrict your right to assemble. They want to restrict your freedom of association. And yes, they want to restrict your right to keep and bear arms. They want to do things like they want to use the pandemic as an excuse to say you shouldn't be able to go purchase firearms. We had Assemblyman Santiago in California decided, he wrote a letter to the Department of Justice saying you should stop doing all background checks. Because we don't want people in this, when people are scared, we don't want them purchasing firearms. We don't want them to have the ability to be able to defend themselves. In the state of Florida, you have the Department of Agriculture, which handles concealed carry permits. They've decided, yeah, no, you can submit your paperwork, but we're not going to process it because we're not going to do fingerprints anymore. We're going to stop you from being able to exercise your fundamental rights because we know that rights are dangerous. And when the people decide to exercise their rights, then we know that the government is in jeopardy. And when I say the government, I'm really speaking the tyrants, those tyrants who are in government. Because see, folks, they want to control you. They want to do things like they've done here in California, where they restrict the ability of individuals to be able to reach out, to be able to impact legislation that's being passed. And so they pass all sorts of crazy stuff. These are trying times. And there's a reason why people want to exercise their rights, their fundamental rights during these sorts of times, because this is the time. This is the time that those rights, it's for these times that those rights are enumerated in our Constitution. And that's also, by the way, the reason why people who've never exercised these rights before are now deciding that they're going to do it. Because even they know the times that we are in. Anyway, folks, just don't believe the hype, right? Don't believe the hype. No, there is not more violence because more people are purchasing firearms. There is more violence, well, because you have the tyrants trying to control the people. And as the tyrants try to control the people fight back. They may not always necessarily fight back at who they should be fighting back at. They may not always fight back in the way that they should fight back. But they do tend to fight back. Anyway, folks, that's going to be it for today's Coffee with Craig. We very much appreciate you tuning in. We appreciate you liking and sharing the program and telling your friends about the Firearms Policy Coalition. We are the home in the fight for civil rights. Got to use them or you're going to lose them. You guys take care.
If you like our videos, follow, subscribe, like, and share.